Hello and welcome to this inaugural edition of Hacker Dialogues. So Hacker Dialogues is a podcast that is basically meant to be just a bunch of pen testers hanging out talking about pen tester stuff. You've got so me as a host, I'm Bo Bullock. You've also got Derek Banks, who's here with me. Say hi, Derek.
Hello.
We filmed this episode with a couple friends up here in Virginia. And we had a good time just hanging out and talking about random things. And it might be a complete waste of your time, but you might get some stuff out of it too. So in this episode, what we did is we talked about a number of topics, but some of the highlights were we talked about Bluetooth baselining to basically detect unauthorized devices that are coming into your vicinity. We also talked about zip bombs. We talked about two-factor authentication and password spraying, and Derek provided some fun stories from some of the pen tests that he's done in the past. Fireside chats. We talked about starting your own pen test company, which, hey John, we're definitely not going to do that. So. So if you're listening, it's not about that. But we also talked about how the cloud is really just somebody else's system. So this is the very first episode. We're going to try to do this probably monthly or so. Hope you enjoy it. Here's a riff.
I basically wear around a Bluetooth network, right? I mean, I probably emit Bluetooth,
I think most humans do these days.
Yeah, I probably, without anything on, I'm probably emitting Bluetooth right now. But so, anytime I've looked at sniffing it, I decided to lie down until the urge passed.
Oh, dude, I spent quite a good amount of time trying to like intercept drone traffic. I had a drone that I thought was I thought it was Wi-Fi, right? Like there was a controller to the drone.
Yeah.
But it was Bluetooth, and I discovered that, and I was like, you know what? I want to hack this. But, that was one of those moments. I had to just lie down and let the urge pass.
I've been looking at it as a way of not sniffing the packets, but just using it as physical intrusion detection.
Oh, so you're talking about recording it with
an SDR.
Yeah. So
that's a great idea.
So Pony Express put out this Blue Hydra tool.
Okay.
That just sniffs for Bluetooth traffic and pulls MAC addresses and names and stuff like that. So anything that's Bluetooth and is trying to find somebody or broadcasting out its name gets picked up by the system, and it dumps it all to a SQL database, and then you just build these are my trusted users. I've seen this
if I forget
MAC address 50 times in the past 50 days. So they're probably somebody that works here.
That sounds really close to the something that Tim Thomas built. Actually, he wrote a Wi-Fi tool.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi tool.
I can't remember the name of the tool, but basically the idea was that you have a list of known Wi-Fi MAC addresses that come in your range, and if the mailman walks up, it alerts you, right? Or if somebody that is outside of your normal occupancy of your Wi-Fi network. If you detect a beacon that it's a MAC address you don't recognize, alert you. I mean, potentially could tell you if somebody's trying to rob your house or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
I should probably go ahead and intro this because I am recording us now. So what we're doing right now is hanging out. As of right now, I think what we're going to call this thing is probably the Hacker Dialogues. It's just going to be occasional. I'm not going to try to keep it to any schedule. Maybe monthly or so, somewhere around there, where we just hang out and talk about things. Right now, you got Derek Banks, you got Bo Bullock, we have Woody.
Yeah, Woody Gates.
Woody Gates and Craig
Vincent.
So we're currently in Virginia. This is going to be something that definitely Derek and I, at any con we go to, we're going to end up doing. But, we'll probably do it remotely too.
Beers and podcasting.
Beers and podcasting. We're going to just talk about hacker things, pen testing, red team stuff. Maybe some just story time with the pentesters kind
Story
of thing.
time with Bo Bullock.
Oh no! It's not just me. It's going to be a group effort. We're going to have a fun time and just talk about.
Yeah,
interesting
you're
stuff.
talking about WUDS, Wi-Fi User Detection System.
Yes,
which
that's
sounds
it.
like a really cool thing to do with a Raspberry Pi that's just sitting on the shelf and not like your Kodi box or
Yes,
something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the Bluetooth piece though. Like, how's that going to work for like a big organization? Like, somebody brings in like a new like Bluetooth headset or something in their gym bag. Like,
Well,
security knocks on their door. Like,
every Fitbit would knock.
Yeah,
I feel like
and
that's
nobody
gonna
wears
work
these
exactly.
around,
Yeah,
right?
nobody,
Like, you know.
nobody wears them around.
So it's a really cool idea. So it's sort of similar to the whole was it the Bishop Fox like long range card reader, right? Where you would put like in a messenger bag, like one of the large like HID panels, and hook it up to like it was an Arduino breadboard. I don't know what they were using, but the idea being is that instead of touching the badge to clone it and get access, you would basically sit outside,
You just walk by somebody.
right, and
Yeah.
as people walked in, you would essentially clone their badges and then be able to go, replay and get physical access. So to answer your original question, that was before we were recording. Yeah, we do physical stuff. So it seems like it's becoming a little bit more popular, and sometimes we have customers that sort of marry it to, you're coming on site for a Wi-Fi, so let's do a physical too. Bo and I were actually recently on a physical, and I thought about requesting hazard pay, because one thing we probably should start asking in the future is, how's the adjacent neighborhood to your facility?
I thought you were going to say armed guards, but
Well, that too. I mean,
You know
no.
what,
In all seriousness, that's a valid concern.
We actually do ask that. Like, if you're, if you hire us for a physical, are there armed guards? Because, hey, let's face it, that's something that would be good to know for certain, attacks that you might try, like certain things. So I don't really want to be caught like using an under the door tool or a lockpick, and then all of a sudden, like, hey,
There's a gun in the back of your head.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Get on the ground now.
Well, the Bluetooth thing, I don't think you could use it as like an individual tool to identify people, but if you like all of a sudden detect a new device on your network,
You would identify anomalies.
Then you can pull up your security
so-
cameras and say, "Hey, did this person?"
But so
just,
it's
like,
not a red team tool as much as it's a blue team, because I like
Yeah.
that idea for like, okay, I know as a baseline, looking for like anomalous network traffic, I know what my baseline looks like, so I'm going to now look for something that's outside of that baseline,
Yeah.
right? That seems like a really cool application.
or
of
even
that.
even things like volume for times a day. I mean, like at nighttime, maybe you have a couple of janitors coming in, but that's not
Yeah. Because I definitely know I've been on a physical before with Bo, where we certainly cased the joint.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, and we definitely had our Fitbits or whatever at the time, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
On, so like we could have absolutely provided some sort of metadata to like an analyst who was collecting Bluetooth, and that could have probably led to us getting detected. I mean, now thinking backwards now, I mean, absolutely, that's something to consider.
Of course, we also had a nice cover story that time. Where, it was winter. We had like hoodies on. So I have a picture of Bo with a Yagi antenna,
with a black hat
hat
on.
I've seen that picture. Is that the cover story? Was all our car broke down and we're
No.
That was a different one. That was a different one.
Yeah, no. The cover story there was we were ghost hunters.
Yeah.
that's actually
Come on, walking around with a Yagi antenna, it's kind of obvious.
Did you have somebody
I mean,
with a camera so you could like sell the whole thing?
But I mean,
Well,
Yeah,
I don't want
that's
to
right.
undersell the knowledge
We're
of law enforcement.
amateurs.
Are they going to see a Yagi and know what it is? Can you tell them you're hunting ghosts? Like,
Yeah, no, they'll just back away slowly because you're even more weird than they thought.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Just carry a Bible with you too, and then you can pretend you're Mormons.
That's
You're Mormon
exactly.
ghost hunters.
no, I'm not going to be dressed the same way. Though.
so Woody, tell us about zip bombs.
Zip
Okay.
bombs, yes.
So this is actually something I saw on Reddit a while ago, of protecting like a WordPress site or some other sort of popular like blogging system that you're hosting, and you actually put the zip bomb inside of a PHP file and put it in your like your admin folders, where these script kiddies are just scanning WordPress sites for
Hitting like an admin directory.
yeah, and looking for these default admin directories where you may have stored credentials.
Like
by
WP-admin
Yeah.
specifically, right?
Yeah, and you basically put a zip bomb in there, and so when they scan it, it automatically downloads and extracts the zip bomb onto their scanning machine, and then all of a sudden their scanner stops working.
So but they're like peeling off the site, like recursive wget trying to grab the
Yeah.
whole thing down.
Gotcha, right.
Oh, okay, so that makes sense. And then yeah, so what about unintended consequences?
Well, there shouldn't be any, because your actual users are going to be following a link to a alternate folder, and unless they're trying to go to a default folder for some reason.
That's where I go to the WP admin folder all the time when I go to a WordPress. Oh wait.
Well, I don't know. You might have to worry about that, but you know, if they download it, then they might have to boot off a thumb drive and delete all the extracted files again. But
So the idea is that I have this zip file that's like highly compressible, but if I decompress it, it is
yeah, so
much
you
larger.
take like a 10 meg file that's it's zipped down to 10 megs, and then as soon as it's extracted, it's 10 gigabytes or 100 terabytes.
So there's no like active defense, like kind of like hacking back kind of consequences to that kind of thing?
No, because more than likely
That's where you store your A's.
That's right. That's where I store all my zeros.
In this zip file.
That's right. On my web server. I'm sorry,
it's
you
gonna
found my
it's
backup.
gonna fill up your memory. Your system's memory is gonna fill up before even your hard drive, because it's moving through your RAM to get dumped to the hard drive, and the RAM fills up, and now your system crashes. And so there were some comments on there about like writing a fuzzer so that you could actually see like how the session got disconnected from your server to like determine if
Like
it was
determine if
affected.
the
Yeah.
system died.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, as long as it has to be tied to the the Price is Right. Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, well, it's a PHP file. You can
I like
put that
it.
in there if you want.
I like it.
That's a nifty idea. That's certainly offensive countermeasure
for
kind
sure.
of thing. I like that idea. Definitely not something you want to accidentally misplace
Right.
on your
Yeah.
website, though.
True.
Yeah, definitely.
True.
So, who has a good story?
Anyone?
Not really.
I can tell a single factor authentication story.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about
Like a
single
fi-
factor. Oh
a
god.
fireside chat. Yeah. So at Black Hills, I guess we seem to have a reputation for password spraying, which I've heard some blue team folks. I've seen conference talks where pen testers do this thing, but actual attackers do not, and I find this difficult to believe.
They're just
right?
not seeing it.
Yeah, I find it difficult that if you have a single factor portal, that it hasn't dawned on any bad actor in the world that taking a list of users that you gathered through open source reconnaissance, and we'll just try like one really crappy password for your 10,000 users. I mean, I gotta say that my time at Black Hills, that's been a really successful
Oh, absolutely.
thing.
Same here.
And then, but I actually heard recently from a client that we successfully password sprayed. They were talking to another analyst in the industry, and apparently that analyst actually said, "Oh, you got tested by Black Hills, right?" So
no, it can't be just be us.
It
I mean,
can't be. No, it can't be. But my story starts with a successful password spray, specifically on Office 365, right? So the client had an Office 365 portal that was single factor, and so I was able to gain email access. I was able to start reading some people's emails, the time of the engagement. It was most likely the password was spring 2017 or something like that, right? So then they had a Citrix environment where the users could go into and get to apps that they needed when they were remote. However, that was two-factored, and So I tried to log into the Citrix environment, and I noticed that you could trust your computer if you got a code to your email. And so since I'm
You had
now
access to email.
reading email, I decided that, well, I can probably get this code.
Mm-hmm.
And then gained access to a number of users' Citrix environments, to which they then had Outlook as a way or an application that they could run through the Citrix environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I decided, hey, it'd be a good idea to set up a malicious Outlook rule to go download my payload and run. And so that worked flawlessly, and I got I think at the time PowerShell Empire is what I was using session on the Citrix server. And this was somewhere around 9 o'clock at night or so, and I decided to spend a little extra time. And I spent, 11, 12 o'clock kind of, pivoting through the environment, got to a couple of things, and I called it a night, and went to bed. And then next morning I got an email from the client around 8:30, 9 o'clock, something around those lines, saying, hey, we got this from our MSSP, was this you? And what they had triggered on, and I'm glad that they did, was a base 64 encoded PowerShell command. Because that's, what the payload ran.
Was it sysmon?
No, I don't know if it was sysmon. I don't know what they had to do it, but hey, look, they found it. So good on them,
absolutely.
right? Yeah, good on them. But the content of the email that was forwarded to me was the analyst on duty apparently said that it was either someone messing around with PowerShell or it was a sign of lateral movement. No, okay.
Yeah, how many users do you have that are just messing around with PowerShell?
If you have users that are messing around with
When I was a developer, I would play with some stuff. I was allowed.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair
developers typically aren't under the same rules as most people anyway, right?
enough. Yeah, I thought that you're supposed to take developers and hold them away in your network on a VLAN that was almost.
They all,
Yeah, hey, if you're a developer, just keep messing with PowerShell and launching
That would be ideal, right?
launching macros and documents and anything you can do that's outside of
But
the
even
whitelist.
even so, even if you're a developer and playing around, running base 64 encoded PowerShell commands is probably a little outside of the scope of playing around, right? But the moral of that story really is that so if that was an actual attacker, I had 7-8 hours before anyone knew.
And that's good. I mean, that. I mean,
Oh, no.
for the
It is,
the
but
client,
to
I mean.
me, if that was my MSSP,
right.
that's a phone call. Get
Oh,
me
absolutely.
out of bed. That's
Yeah.
something happened immediately. No.
But on the contrast, I mean,
it wasn't
we've done
470 days.
Yeah,
or
yeah, I
whatever
mean-
actually, I think the numbers came down recently. I think it's now somewhere
Yeah,
in
it's
100
100
days.
something,
it's
yeah.
less than a year. It's
Yeah.
less than a year
Yeah,
now,
less than
But
a
we've
year.
done similar attacks. I mean, not the whole two-factor thing. I mean, yes, we've had other people at the company do the same thing, but we've done attacks where we've, password sprayed an external portal, got in through VPN, and been in for a couple weeks without anyone noticing at all.
Yeah, I guess I recently had a little talk on this that I really think to up the game, not enough of our clients are monitoring internally and looking for things that are just wrong. If you're monitoring your endpoints and looking for commands, some of the things you could look for, how many of your users are running net commands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with none.
Probably your IT stuff.
No, even with IT. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't. In my
I do everything in
experience,
PowerShell now, and you don't use that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
no, I
Okay.
mean,
What I'm saying is, let's say you have an IT staff of 300 people. I'm going to go percentage based on what I've observed in IT. There's probably 10 people maybe in 300 that even use the command line. Well, I'm not talking about the Linux team or the Unix team. I'm talking about Windows administrators. By and large, yeah, if you're a power user and using PowerShell and commands, fine. They're whitelisted.
Yeah,
Everyone
and
else. Like Susie in accounting, net command should not be
Right. Well, and if you know what you're doing, if you're in IT, yeah, you use PowerShell, right? But most attackers don't know what the hell they're doing, and they run net. They run who am I? The first thing when they get on a system, who am I? Am I a local administrator of that system?
Yeah.
Right.
And so, net local group administrator. So, like, you get those commands. So, absolutely.
That's not your serious threats, though. That goes back to the thing I was going to say about, like, the 7 hours. Like, if you're a real threat actor, like, you're going to be, you've already dropped your secondary C2, right? So unless they can trace that through with their
absolutely.
IR and find that, then...
Well, that's sort of my point is, and I don't know what the follow-on was, or rather, I don't know what the follow-on would have been if I would have told the client, no, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't have that visibility into their incident response process. But, if it were me and it was, that kind of indicator, that's an oh crap moment, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we're running two-factor authentication for our Azure privileges for like managing Office 365 and stuff like that. But I've noticed that if I leave the web session open for Azure, that I can refresh it the next day and authenticate without two-factor.
Yeah.
So would you be able to hijack my web session?
Provided we could steal a cookie, yeah.
So I have a story about this. Like fireside chat.
I've got two questions that go way back, including what he just said. So.
All right, I'll tell this story and then
Make a
we'll
note
get
of
out
this.
here.
Yeah, we'll come back.
There's
So,
pads around here somewhere. I read it down.
I was on a red team where we were having a little bit of difficulty, and we had ran a successful phishing campaign and grabbed credentials, right? So we're basically just stealing usernames and passwords, and say we got like 4 or 5 of them. When the majority of the customers' external-facing stuff, we went through a single SSO, like single sign-on,
okay.
right? And then the VPN access was two-factor, but the other SSO stuff was not.
Right.
And so one of the things that was not SSO was a help desk ticket. Like I could log into with just credentials like help desk ticketing. And so what we decided to do, we were running up towards the end of the engagement, was I created a macro-enabled, weaponized spreadsheet, and on behalf of a user, I submitted to the help desk a priority 1 ticket. It was a Friday afternoon, and I said, I cannot open this document. I need help now, right? Please take a look at this and see why I can't open
priority 1. They had to.
Oh, yeah. So
they had to,
I immediately got a shell.
that.
No, I immediately got a C2 session to the help desk, computer. So I'm like, yes, money, right? The person must have had tied to their phone email, right? And so they wrote back and said, this was not me. I did not do this. At this point, it's blown, right? But so they immediately changed their password, and so I could no longer log in as them. I still had access to all the SSO stuff until the token expired. I mean, it went on hours. I still had access. And actually, I don't know how long I would have had access to the single sign-on, because it turned out they had outsourced their help desk, and I actually got a shell and an environment that I was not supposed. It wasn't in scope. But either way, if I was an actual attacker, I was in.
Yeah.
I was in.
Absolutely.
I was in.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that, because I was never in IT. I was never blue team. I was never directly involved in that. So how do you defend? You can't really put two-factor on your help desk portal, right? I mean, that's...
Well, why is
two
it that
factors within your help?
But why is it facing the internet?
Well, that's true.
I can't. I mean, even.
I suppose if you have people working in different parts of the country, they need to log in remotely or something.
If you got people overseas, you got a home office.
VPN, right?
Yeah,
VPN.
we
VPN's
recently
everything.
did a customer where we were not successful, and they did not have a webmail portal.
That's true. Yeah.
Huge company.
And it wasn't just that reason, but yeah.
Well, sometimes you suck, right? Well, at least that's me. Sometimes I suck.
Maybe they
A lot of times you don't
even
you don't even need access to the help desk portal. You just email the help desk email and say here's the attachment, or here's a link to the file that you
that's
want.
a good point.
And just say, hey, can you make a ticket for me? I'm a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey, social engineering is very effective. We've had times where we had someone social engineer a call to the help desk to disable two-factor because I was on travel internationally. Totally worked. Wow. Totally worked.
Back to your point though, you mentioned with two-factor in regards to keeping your session open.
Yeah.
That's all session cookies on the device.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be.
Yes.
So as long
Absolutely.
as if somebody actually compromised your device,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be able to compromise those session tokens.
Okay. Yeah.
and then the second they have the session tokens, they're going to be able to authenticate it to you.
Yeah, and if those tokens don't expire for a long time.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's
so
the big-
when we're doing
the big
web app
one,
pen
yeah.
testing, I mean, a non-expiring token is something we definitely will write up, right? We'll definitely
That's a
Yeah.
finding
put
for sure,
absolutely, it's a finding. And then especially if you don't, protect a cookie appropriately, that's definitely a finding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, if you're not
But
putting
but
the-
for Azure's case, that would be something that Microsoft has to fix. Like my company could never fix that because
it's probably a user
hosted-
problem. I mean,
it's
like
a hosted service.
They're probably assuming that user experience is more important, right? Like they know that they've got a lot of people that are accessing their app all the time, and people don't want to enter
Yeah.
the two-factor. I mean, oh god, security, right? I mean,
Right,
it's a terrible thing to have to.
believe
but it's
I
also
have to
like
open this
incredible
extra thing.
laziness. So like I'm like, well, if I just leave this tab open in my Chrome browser, then I
you're
no
good to
longer
go.
have to get a text message, right? Like, who cares about security when I don't have to check my phone every morning when I need to authenticate with Azure.
Yeah.
And
So going back to the question I had earlier is for reasons I've not seen 365. How different is going after 365 than going after like OWA? 'Cause I know you
As an
like that.
attacker?
Yeah. How different is that?
So OWA on premise, by default, when you boot up like a default instance of OWA, you've got a few different services. You got the Outlook web app, which is your main login portal, right? Like most users are going to typically just log in straight to OWA. And then you've also got a couple other services right alongside it. So you got Exchange Web Services, you got some MAPI, you got obviously SMTP if you want to do direct mail connections to the server. Whereas Office 365 has a lot of the same stuff, but it's organized a little bit differently. So Outlook.office365.com actually does have Exchange Web Services there.
Okay.
It does have an OA login. It has that typical portal that you would go to log in. So in the sense, like from our perspective, it's not
not that much
that different. It's not that different, but the way in which you can implement security protections is a little bit different. So the thing that I've noticed is that with OA, you obviously have to like go with like a vendor for some sort of two-factor software. Whereas with O365, they have Microsoft's MFA built in.
They support it, yeah.
And it's pretty, like from my experience, like I set up a test instance and deployed it fairly quickly. It's pretty much like a checkbox to implement MFA on a box in O365. One of the things that we've noticed with two-factor, with the differences at least between O365 and OA, is that depending on the vendor, they might not support all the protocols. They might not actually protect all the different services that come with OA or with Exchange in general. So, for example, like if you set up a default OA instance and you put a certain two-factor software, I'm not going to name any names, but implement that, it will protect that OA portal. Right? It'll put two-factor on the OA portal, like the main web portal login. But right alongside it on a different URL is Exchange Web Services and MAPI. And typically those are not covered under the same two-factor.
Okay.
So I'll play devil's advocate for many customers that I've talked to, that because when I see OA externally facing that appears to be single factor, I giggle like a schoolgirl. It's probably going to be fun, right? However, I've had customers ask, like they have something tied to that Exchange Web Services, like a phone or a Mac or something like that, and their question is then, well, now what do we do? And so that's when it becomes hard. You can't take that complete red team pen tester type stance where just disable it. Well, maybe it's not that clear, right? Because if you have a user population that's reliant upon it, now it's become a much larger issue. You're going to have to implement some kind of solution that's going to replace that for the user.
So
right?
the biggest thing that I like about what O365 does and their built-in MFA is they create app-specific passwords for those other services. So like Exchange Web Services would have an app-specific password for each user.
That's cool.
So it's not it's not like a full like two-factor thing, but it's not their domain password that they're using to
It's
log
another
in.
layer, right?
Yeah, right. But it's an app-specific password.
Yeah.
I
So
like
how many
that.
users are not using the same passwords for that? Though? Like,
Well, no, it's something that would be generated by MFA.
Oh, okay. So that's the actual MFA like token is separate. Is different
It's a separate
from-
password.
Sort of like
yeah,
when
yeah.
you authorize something in your Gmail port, like you authorize your tablet to
Right,
get to
yeah.
grab the mail without
Yep.
you having to type in your password every time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So who has another story? Are we out of stories
I
for
can't tell any
tonight?
stories.
No?
No. Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about defensive stuff, or let's see what I mean.
I want to talk more about some of the cloud stuff, right? So, like I don't get to see a whole lot of cloud stuff. But my previous company, we were moving stuff off-prem to the cloud, and we were using a lot of like managed service type stuff. Like from an attacker point of view, for reconnaissance and stuff, is it like how do you go about tracking some of that stuff down? Because it's not necessarily going to be tied to like their domain and stuff. Like how do you?
It gets interesting.
Yeah, I did a test last fall against a primarily Azure customer, and they were sort of decentralized. They were like 20 people. They did some financial type things, mainly in Azure, and they I got to say that I didn't get far. I didn't get far at all. They we were able to do some like auditing type stuff through like Azure. I guess we're using Nessus to audit some of the Azure settings, but I think implemented appropriately, the best thing that we could come up with was, hey, like when you set up an Azure instance, it puts RDP listening on some ephemeral port, right?
So you have to really go look at, like,
well, you
the
still need
defaults and
creds,
stuff,
and
yeah.
so I mean, I guess it just depends on the implementation, right? And and speaking from personal experience, like AWS and Azure is sort of or the cloud in general is sort of a sea change, right? Like you think about traditional networks with on-premise email servers, a perimeter and an inside, and all that is completely different now.
It's fragmented and decentralized, and it's just
It is, but from I think to me, like the biggest issue that I've seen is accidental key leakage. Like if you get somebody's AWS keys, for example,
It's a bad day.
Yeah, the amount of damage
Yeah.
that can be done is financially staggering. Right? I mean, I've heard horror stories where 3 days later, it's a $20,000 bill or more, right? And so, and then I imagine you could do something like GitRob or you can scrape GitHub and find keys. I mean, if you're an actual attacker, like with some kind of monetary way to get into a cloud resource, scraping GitHub's probably.
I have kind of an interesting, I don't know if it's like an insight, but I guess a view into like the whole cloud space. So like you talked about Azure, and we typically think about like Amazon, EC2, that kind of stuff. So some cloud providers don't actually do anything in those spaces. They just actually host it in their own networks.
Right.
So I actually did an assessment against a cloud vendor that you could buy quote unquote cloud assets, right? And so like this assessment against this vendor was basically like a typical what we call a pivot assessment, right? Like so they provided access to an internal host as a non-privileged user, and the goal was to see where we could go in the domain, see if we could get to any of the actual like
other customers.
Not even so. Like I wasn't even in that environment. I was in like like their main domain, and that was a completely segmented environment. But it turned out, pivoting around, it was all just a VMware environment. Like it literally was just is a big ESXi environment, and they were selling like various VMs to different customers. And so like the whole cloud was really just ESXi.
Someone else's server.
Yeah, someone else's server. Yeah. Right.
That's what it is, right?
So I mean, so like it's interesting when you think about like the cloud, right? I mean, so that's essentially that's the same thing, right? With I mean, everyone thinks like
and so along those lines, I mean, it's so easy now for people to gain access, like to whatever cloud provider. And in the case of AWS, if you have your marketing folks going off and standing up like shadow IT services, in AWS, like I from relatively limited exposure. I mean, there's a lot of controls, like identity and access management controls. There's a whole checklist of things you should do to secure your AWS environment. How do you regulate that in your in your environment to keep people from going off and doing something that's ill-advised? They don't set it up right, and somehow that ends up being an incident of yours. Like it seems like that the setup and management of the cloud services is really like an important thing. Like dealing with how you configure your AWS instance, especially if you're a company that is using that. Like you should really take the time to go read the documentation of how you're going to go about securing that.
We should probably touch on the ability to test cloud instances as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It does require authorization.
Absolutely.
If a customer of ours
'cause-
owns instances in Amazon and
we're not authorized
and
until
rack
we're
space
authorized.
or whatever, you can't just go attacking
Right, yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
else's servers.
I gotta
You gotta
say,
flag your IPSs or something.
kudos to Amazon and Microsoft. Like, if you're going to be testing them, it's an online form, and authorization
And it's fast.
is yeah, and that doesn't take long at all. Like our customers, when they tell us they have these resources, sometimes they don't even know. Hey, go fill out this form, and I've had it come back like in a matter of a couple of minutes, right? Like the customer's like, hey, here you go. I mean, they said cool. So, I mean, even if it's a day or two, I mean, generally in our engagements, if we have all of the things that we need to test by the time the test starts, that's a good day, right? I mean, there are definitely times that things don't get provisioned in the timely manner. Yeah, I guess I get it, but sometimes things don't start exactly when they're supposed to.
So how do you feel about pivoting through multiple domain environments where it's not set up as like a forest and domains inside the forest, but just like multiple domains inside a single network?
Are there trusts?
There can be.
Yeah.
So, or you've got, like, for our example, we use a Dell migration set of tools to like inherit trust from like a set of groups. It's in one domain. Those groups are migrated to another domain, and then they inherently trust each other.
So, I mean, I would say Bloodhound. Like, that's the answer, right?
Yeah, we're Bloodhound.
There's it's pretty common that we pivot across domains, but it's usually through privilege access through trusts.
Yeah. It's really the same kind of technique, right? Like if I want to go get over into that other domain, and we've had an example before where we got domain in one domain admin in one environment, and that domain administrator was actually an administrator in the other domain, and it was a weird kind of setup where there were a couple of companies that sort of they were like loose partners. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly like how their legal relationship was, but they had domains that different domains that were sort of all trusted together, and the end result was, as we demonstrated by getting domain in one environment and analyzing the trust relationship, we basically own
the
all
entire
of them.
yeah.
We owned them all.
Is that one of the ones where you accidentally went outside of scope?
No. This is a different one,
So
yeah.
we basically just showed that we had the rights, and then we asked, right? So
Yes, that's not a common thing that we do that.
Yeah, no,
like
no.
that was completely an accident, but
yeah. So
It always is, right? I mean, if you
look, there
well,
are times I've
should
gone out
be.
of scope.
yeah, it should be.
I mean, I've had customers send me I've had done spearfishing with exploitation terrifies the crap out of me because who knows, right? I actually had a customer one time that gave me an email list of their domains, right? And I sent spearfishing with exploitation, and I got a shell. I'm like, hey, yeah, good day, right? I started pivoting around, and I'm like, this really does not
odd.
look like their environment should look like at all. So I paused and contacted the customer, and I'm like, yeah, that's not us. And they went and looked, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a subcontractor in marketing. Like, oh yeah, so that's an immediate phone call to John.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
our boss.
Back away slowly, take screenshots of exiting out of everything. Like,
Everything that I did, like,
not a fun position to be in.
Yeah,
And that's
'cause-
and that goes back to a conversation that Derek, you and I had a while ago about like what it takes to start like a offensive like a pen testing company, like that, not just like that. Hey, I can pen test stuff. Like I'm good at it. Like let's go do it. It's like there's a lot of stuff in the back end, like legally too, that you really have. to,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
You have to have really good lawyers, like the.
And insurance.
Yep.
Insurance.
Is a big thing. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're not backed, I mean, like by some sort of insurance, and you break something, it's a bad day.
Yeah. So I mean, and so
especially in the big industries.
yeah, I mean, to me, that's one of the great things about being at Black Hills is you don't have to worry about any of that crap. That's somebody else's problem.
Well, it's our boss's problem.
Right, exactly. But
Well,
if
wouldn't
you're,
that be true if you were a pen tester for any company? Really, like you wouldn't be dealing with the legal aspects of like what
Well,
happens.
yeah.
if
I mean, unless
suppose
it's your
so.
company.
Yeah.
Well,
Unless it's your company. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with this, I mean, isn't there? There's a lot of. There's definitely a
So a good example is being like a private contractor to
I was
any
gonna
given
say, yeah,
person,
there's-
right?
there's always that-
So
that-
like I've had people that have asked like, hey, can you do this thing on the side for me? Like, I just want you to test my environment, just
Yeah.
real quick. Just give me like
Mm-hmm.
a good look, from a pen tester into my environment. And I actually contacted our own boss and I was like, hey, so is this something that seems like it's a good idea to do? It's like, well, you're not insured, it's probably a bad idea. Like if you broke something, you're liable for that.
right, yeah.
So.
yeah, I've had people approach me to like help like secure their computers. But anyone who approaches me for anything that's offensive, I'm like, yeah, you're consulting at blackhills.com. Like, you need to talk to
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
Like, yeah, that's
There's always that desire, especially like getting into it. Like people are going to approach you and ask you, "Is like you can do
Oh yeah,
stuff." Like,
dude, I've had people at the conference tell me, hey, we're looking for a pen test. Can you help me? I'm like, absolutely. Here's my card.
I work for a pen test company.
And, contact consulting at Black
Yep.
Hills InfoSec.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
but going out on your own is a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea. It's just you
have
have
be
to
very
prep
careful.
right,
Be
right?
very careful.
Yeah.
So I would definitely do your homework and go if you're going to decide to go out and be your own pen testing company, you probably know something about it, right? You've been through training, maybe you're a pen tester somewhere else, so you should probably already kind of know like some of these pitfalls. But yeah, I mean you can hear John tell stories about like we have customers who come to us and they'll like demand X amount of insurance before we can pen test them, and sometimes that dollar figure is high enough we're like, oh yeah.
And the other thing to consider too is like you don't necessarily like have to start your own company. Like we know a couple people that are just solo contractors that they go to a few different pen testing companies and they just get extra work. Like even our company, like we have
So they're
extra
kind
times.
of covered underneath.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah, they get covered.
we
under-
probably
just-
have half as many subcontractors as we have testers, and and the reason we have them is because they're available to do the work for whatever they do as their quote full-time job or whatever. They can still fit in what we do, and sometimes what our work is kind of bursty. I mean, right now for the last, I don't know, as long as I can remember, like 18 months or so, it's been kind of nonstop. But there are those lulls where what if we didn't have contracts coming in for 2 or 3 months? Like
You got to fill the gaps.
yeah, you got to fill the gaps, right? And so, however, I don't know how long it's been since that's actually happened, but
We've been pretty busy. We've
well,
been busy lately, yeah, for
and,
sure.
think the nightly news and the Russians and whoever else, right? I mean,
You gotta
it
protect
is what it is.
Yes. Exactly.
Cyber's so hot right now.
You're gonna,
So maybe another red team topic, and then we'll call it
Okay.
an episode. I think.
I got nothing, man.
Nothing.
No.
Do you do any wireless stuff, like wireless assessments?
I mean, I did some training for it. Like we do some, but it's not
So,
anything that. So I'm actually it's something enterprise wireless.
Yeah.
There are some ways to if it's misconfigured. Do you guys know anything about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So.
Identifying it and then exploiting it.
All right, so with your typical WPA2 network, right? Your typical WPA2 PSK, you have a password to authenticate to the wireless network, right? With enterprise, typically, the best way to set it up is that you've got a user or you've got a domain of users, right, that have to authenticate as themselves.
Right.
So there's not a group password, so to speak, right? Like not everyone can use the same password.
There's like a radius server internal.
There's a radius server that's authenticating back to the AD environment, right?
Yep.
And then on top of that, to make it more secure, you do certificate validation. So you make sure that those clients validate they're talking to the right server when they're authenticating. So the attack is this. The attack is that if those clients are not configured correctly to validate that certificate, you can be a rogue AP. Okay. And you can say, hey, I'm the radius server you should be authenticating to. Authenticate to me. And if they're not validating that cert, they will try to authenticate to you. And when they do that, it password hash.
Okay.
And NTLM-v2
So,
hash.
It's a pretty straightforward evil twin with enterprise.
Pretty straightforward.
So there's
what
actually
I've noticed is that getting users, like if you've got a BYOD network, getting users to install certs on their laptop or their phone is very difficult.
Yep.
That's why they go on a guest network.
Yep, exactly.
And not your enterprise network.
And so, how do you get these users to basically understand that, like, yes, you have to go to this website, you have to download my cert and follow my instructions. You know, it's 3 steps.
Security.
Yeah.
But,
Like, no, this is why we do assessments, because
and so would there be any way for me to say, oh, well, you haven't downloaded this cert, so you're not allowed on my network?
Yes. So this is the thing where like policy comes into play. Like I know, like as technical folks, we like to look down on kind of compliancy things, but this is where policy enforcement is actually really important, right? So I had an engagement before, a year ago, where I was doing a wireless, and they had a properly configured, WPA2 enterprise configuration. It was certificate enforcement. I couldn't pull off an evil twin attack. However, because of the reason you just described, their executives who had iPads had to have a WPA2 pre-shared key network. This is an urban environment. So literally from across the street in the building they were in, the hotel across the street, I could pick up their signal and intercept the 4-way handshake. I cracked it. So
now you could intercept all the enterprise.
But then it wasn't on the guest network. It was on the flat network.
Oh, man.
And I was then I now had credentials to log in their network.
You might as well have been in a building.
And I'm across the street in a hotel, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wi-Fi is.
So would the solution to that have been for the network guys to put that WPA2 network on a private VLAN?
Yeah, so unfortunately in that situation, the solution would have been for some executive to realize that their convenience at the cost of the security. No, it sometimes does. Sometimes it can.
Convenience is not the way to go.
Wish in one hand, Eric. Wish in one hand.
Yeah, exactly, right. But yeah, so also the solution could have been as a technical, please don't screw us kind of thing. You could have put that on a not the flat network and maybe ACL'd it in such a way where you could the executives could still get to what they needed to get. But yeah, and taking a step back, I've actually said this to some customers and here recently that it's unfortunate that sometimes C-level folks think their convenience is more important than security.
Oh, yeah.
I have abused that on more than one occasion to actually get into a network.
I've had the same thing on wireless. So a guest network, enterprise network, and on the guest network, authenticate, or not even authenticate to it, just connect to it because it's open.
Right, yeah.
Start scanning internal subnets of their internal network, straight flat network. It's
they thought it was segmented.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's a guest network. It's totally segmented. There's no, they can't talk to internal hosts. And I'm hitting internal I don't know, security
RDP
portals.
to your domain controller.
Yeah,
What are you
exactly.
talking about?
Yeah.
So the wireless space is sometimes often forgotten, and then it kind of rolls into the red team, aspect of it. I mean, if you can take advantage of something. I mean, I've definitely done it on more than one occasion to gotten in through a wireless misconfiguration.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so one thing I wanted to say was, for testing, there's a tool that was recently released. I guess it was at Black Hat Arsenal EPAMR.
Yes.
So it used to be, I definitely have had my times fighting host APD,
yeah.
WPE, right? I've faulted in the past. Here recently it seems a little bit better, but we had really good luck here recently with EPAMR.
Yeah.
Yep. 2 commands up and running.
Yep.
Right.
And we're probably going to end up doing an episode of Tradecraft Security Weekly about that.
Yeah,
sometime.
That's really cool.
EPAMR, it basically it uses host APD, but he modified it a bit to make it a little bit more user friendly. And it has a few more tags.
He probably fought it in the past. This
exactly. Yeah.
This should not be so hard.
Yeah, so that's Solstice, Gabriel Ryan, I believe. Is his name.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I need to set up certificate authentication for my
yes. Because you don't have certificate validation.
So
for your home network,
but I mean, I'm beyond most people, and I've got a Radius server.
But keep in mind,
house,
keep in mind this, that if somebody were to intercept it, they would have to go crack.
Yeah,
the
so
password, right? They're not going to get your code tag.
And so, from my experience in cracking WPA2 PSK, if you have a 15 or 20 character password, good luck. It's going to take a long time. And then on top of that, if you change your SSID every 6 months.
So that's WPA2 PSK though. That's not enterprise.
That's what I was talking about. Like I thought he was staying at home.
So I've got a couple of like Ruckus access points and Raspberry Pi running free Radius.
Yeah, he's running
running
enterprise at home, man. He's running
I
enterprise wireless at home. That's why I said that. Yeah.
I thought I had a complicated network for the love of God.
But I am being lazy because I've got the usernames and passwords stored in clear text on free Radius. So if you ever got access to my Raspberry Pi, you have access to my Wi-Fi.
Be more concerned about the Until MV2 password hashes that you're going to be passing to rogue APs that are in your network or in your area.
So here, and it goes back to the very beginning. Maybe you should look at Tim Tomes's WUDs.
Yeah, there you go.
Other than the Spectrum, I've got like the default WPA2 that came on my router, which actually had one this time, so that was nice. But
at least it has a password.
It wasn't wet this time, so that's
at least on the side of Verizon's right. So I recently ditched my Quantum router and I went with the ONT. Like, so I upgraded my FiOS to where basically the DMARC in my laundry room is now I have Ethernet that was going to the back of my Quantum router, and then I finally realized the other day, I'm like, I can probably just plug that into my pfSense box, right? And I did. And I'm like, oh yeah, straight. And so now I don't need the Quantum router anymore. But at least they have like a relatively complex password on the side of it. But still, like the reason I came to that realization, I was setting up a VPN because I was going to be on the road for a month and I needed to get back to my network. And, VPN was over UDP, but I accidentally went over TCP. And realized that my Quantum router had the administrative login publicly facing, and whether or not Verizon filters that upstream, I don't care, right? I mean that's not. That just goes against every like fiber of my being. So now this has got to go, right? And anyway, now pfSense at the very top of it.
So I've noticed that ISPs, when they give you like a router, you just bought internet for your apartment or whatever, they give you a router, you set it up, and all of a sudden you're broadcasting out a Wi-Fi station for them, so that like
you're talking about Xfinity.
But
not all routers are like that.
But I mean, I've seen other ISPs that do it. It's not just Comcast.
No, that's about sharing the Wi-Fi spectrum,
right?
With the neighborhood.
I'm not familiar with this.
It sounds like a bunch of comments.
Okay, so a lot of these ISP companies have decided that it's a good idea to share your bandwidth with everyone. And so they basically create a router that has your access point on it too, so you can connect to it. But they also broadcast this other
like
SSID,
a side channel
SSID, so that random
The router next
passerbys.
door.
So that way, I'm walking by with my cell phone. It's just going to connect up
Well,
to your
is that one of
The
the
idea
programs where
is-
you get like a discount, or is that like
No. But the
No.
idea is
I
that like their customer, you could go to a completely different city that they also support,
Yeah.
and like now you have free Wi-Fi essentially because you just type in your credentials.
I was doing
wow.
I was doing a wireless assessment for a company, and I'm walking around. I'm like, I see like something that shouldn't be here, and and I started like with the Yagi antenna looking like a Ghostbuster walking around, and I was like, it's probably in that closet. It seems really like hot right here. They open it up. It's a freaking like ISP router in their little data closet, plugged into their network, into the corporate network, with a completely separate SSID.
And so anybody that comes by with
Anybody,
that sharing program
anybody could have been on their network.
authenticates, and then they're on their network.
Yeah.
No.
Well, no.
Wait,
It's supposed to be
they're
segmented.
probably not on their internal network, right? I mean, I don't know.
I didn't test that. I didn't test
It's
it,
supposed
but
to be
but-
segmented, but
Yeah.
has anybody actually like done a
a good
yeah,
job
that-
of
that's
like
a-
trying to hop. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
okay.
not.
That's a good point, but I mean, at the very least, you're taking my bandwidth. I'm paying for,
Yeah.
150 megabits or whatever, and if you're taking 50 of it, and I don't know who the hell you are, that ain't cool, right?
Right, yeah,
It isn't
yeah.
cool at all.
No, that's not cool. Well, I think this has been a pretty good first episode.
think so.
I think we should probably wrap this one up,
All right.
and we'll see you guys in the next month.
Craig
on-
has to do laundry.
Yeah. So, thanks for watching. We're gonna probably do more of these. We'll see how it goes. I mean, maybe in a month or so.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thank
guys,
you.
thanks
Yeah.
for joining. You guys we'll have to do like a go-to meeting or something next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you guys on?
Better. I mean, like I'm gonna be at Wild West Hacken Fest.
Yeah, well, for
Yeah,
sure
well.
we'll do it there.
If we get ShmooCon tickets, we'll be there.
ShmooCon
yeah.
tickets.
So,
That'll be fun.
the Hacker Dialogues. Thanks for watching. Bye.